unfortunately, I am not giving this movie a good review. In fact, I had to give it a Rotten Tomato, something I rarely do. With great power comes great responsibility. And I often feel, I try really hard to give a fresh tomato if possible, because that's people's work, in front of and behind the camera. But this movie, there's just no getting around it. It's a Rotten Tomato. So up front, I want to say, because I know a lot of you are excited about this movie because of Lady Gaga, the Rotten Tomato has nothing to do with Gaga. She is a very good actress. I felt that way before I saw the film. I still feel that way having seen it. And I think that Patrizia is a great role for her. I think she picked a really good role. And I can see, Ridley Scott, this cast, she turned down a lot of other work to take this, and I think she's clearly following in the footsteps of Cher. Actors follow other previous actors. Robert Pattinson's following Leonardo DiCaprio, Timothée Chalamet, Johnny Depp, Lady Gaga, Cher. I think Cher's a good choice for her. Gal Gadot, Angelina Jolie. And I think that Gaga has chosen correctly. But with this project, I hope that next time around, Gaga is more careful with the script, because while on paper, this looks like a very promising film, when it comes to the paper of the screenplay, I think these problems would have been evident there. And Gaga is a big enough star, certainly when she signed on to this film, to demand a rewrite. So going forward, Gaga, don't be afraid to demand a rewrite. You deserve it, because this movie is not good. All right, so I've been telling you for a while that word in Tinseltown was that House of Gucci was bad. And none of us could believe it watching these amazing trailers and, again, who was in the film. But we hadn't read the script. How could anyone mess up this cast in telling this story? But they did. And I would actually describe House of Gucci as boring. Bad might be a little, I don't know. It's so boring that it is bad. It's very, particularly in the second half of the film. It's boring. But this is a non-spoiler review, in case you're not familiar with the true story that this is based on. I'm going to do a spoiler. And Gaga stands, again, don't worry too much. She's going to take a little bit of a hit from this film because it's boring. But she's the best thing in it, followed very closely by Jared Leto. Do they still have Oscar chances? I'm not sure. The movie is so bad, I don't know if it's appropriate to recognize it, even with nominations for good performances within the film. It's just not good. But the pandemic, lucky for everyone involved, has created another crazy award season. So I could see nominations still for Gaga and Leto. They are deserving for their work here. They're deserving. They're the reasons to see the film. Also, you learn a lot about the Gucci company, which I'm going to touch on. But don't worry, I'm not going to give anything away. But it's not Gaga and Leto's fault that the movie doesn't work. It's the script. And this woman, she wrote screenplays a long time ago, but they weren't awful. I don't know how everybody making this movie wasn't like, this is a ridiculous mistake that we've made. So I'm not going to ruin anything, but I'm going to explain to you the problem. So this starts out, especially because you're going to want to know if you're a Lady Gaga fan. So it starts out as Patrizia's story. But then suddenly in the third act, they just totally abandoned her character. They're like, goodbye. Not only was she holding the movie together with charisma, Lady Gaga, and the only character we'd connected with up until that point, but that means that when Patrizia makes the fateful decision that this entire movie is based on, the whole reason they made it, we're not with her, which is really weird. I would have liked to have seen her make that decision. It's, again, a silly, stupid, and obvious mistake. I think that the movie, there's an end title card, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Is this movie supposed to be about the fall of the House of Gucci? It kind of is, which I guess is why it's called House of Gucci and not Patrizia. But the first 2/3 of the movie are Patrizia's story. It's a 1970s, 80s Italian Cinderella story, which they're not shy about. They're name dropping Cinderella all over the place, mixed with Goodfellas. And it totally focuses on Patrizia for the first 2/3 of the film. But then for the third act, they just totally ditch the Cinderella angle and Patrizia. You're like, hey, wait a minute. Wasn't this movie about Patrizia? Where'd she go? If we're supposed to be learning about the fall of the entire Gucci family, and we have them in the movie with these great actors playing them, then why do we spend like an hour with Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, who don't have enough to do. If you can bore audiences watching Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, well then, congratulations, that's quite the accomplishment. Not a good one, but it is noteworthy. Oh, it's noteworthy. But this movie, though, I have to say, it actually made me finally truly get Gaga's appeal. I've always enjoyed Lady Gaga. I'm a fan of her work. I really like her. But I got why she has so many fans. So in her very first scene, she's walking across a parking lot. That's all I'll say. And it just struck me that she is just so effortlessly comfortable in her own skin. And that is not only extremely likable, but admirable. We should all strive to feel as good about ourselves and as comfortable about ourselves and have that kind of personal ownership as Gaga does. I was like, wow, you're awesome, Lady Gaga. She and Driver have a very good meet cute and one long, intense sex scene. I'm like, oh, okay, we're gonna watch the whole thing. Oh, that's fine. But otherwise, they seem more like they're playing house than are an actual married couple in the film. The actors are great. The locations are luxurious. The cinematography is stunning. They really pulled back on the soundtrack, though. It's not like the trailers at all. They'll have a couple of those songs in there for a little bit, but they're turned down too low. They don't bring them in strong enough for long enough. You're like, use the music. And also the script, though. The script, again, is the real culprit. It's paper thin and amateurish. It's bad. Also, there's no way, considering what Patrizia ultimately does, that she is the saint that this script and Gaga make her out to be. And if she was that much of a saint, well, not really a saint, but I think she came across as a good person. But the movie, therefore, does a horrible job depicting how she became broken enough to do what she does. The one thing that I do really like about the movie as is that it highlights that until just recently, and this is still the case in many places, a woman can only succeed through a man. You know that saying, behind every successful man is a strong woman? That's because women weren't allowed to stand out front. Amy Adams had a similar monologue in Vice about how Lynn Cheney had no choice but to help her husband Dick build his career because she would never be allowed to have a career herself despite her very impressive education. So many women used to have to get married because that was the equivalent, up until just recently, of finding a job. You need a job to live. It used to be you needed to have a husband to support you. How would you have income? And now less women have to get married. There isn't that same urgency. Some people are wondering why not as many people get married. Here's one of the main reasons. It's because now women can have their own jobs, and in some cases, their own careers, instead of having to do it through a man. So this is particularly interesting considering what happens to Patrizia in her marriage to Maurizio. So that's really, keep that in mind while you're watching the film. And I think Gaga plays this aspect of Patrizia. You can see her mind working very, very well. It's almost as if Gaga only wanted to play this aspect of the story and not what happens in the third act, which is weird because, again, that's the whole point of the movie. I would watch House of Gucci. You definitely should watch it, but I would not see it in theaters. It's almost 3 hours, and it is a total slog. This never happens to me, but I had to really fight the urge during the press screening to take my phone out, my cell out, to get me through the more boring parts of the film. It just gets real boring, to the point I don't think I could watch it again. It just gets so boring. But also, you have to see Jared Leto's performance. For all his ridiculousness and how often he misses the mark in most of his roles, occasionally he really delivers, and this is one of those times. It makes all the other times worth it. This is probably his best performance since Dallas Buyers Club, for which he won his Oscar. And really, it's almost impossible to tell that it's him in there. And I thought Paolo Gucci's story was also very interesting and sad. I thought it was great. I thought Paolo Gucci had some talent. And I think they didn't make it clear enough. He was mixing pastels and browns, and they do that today. So I think they were trying to say that Paolo Gucci was just ahead of his time, but I don't think the movie made that point clear enough, because I thought that was very interesting. But anyway, like the recent Halston, which is much better, I think because partially it was a series and it had the time to do these things correctly. But it's interesting to learn about the icons of fashion and what really happened with them and their businesses, plus the reality of how the industry actually works. You will certainly never go into a Gucci salon again and look at it the same way. And that in and of itself is pretty interesting. So again, I think it's worth seeing, but it's a streaming movie. It's a streaming movie for sure. We'll do a deeper dive in my spoiler review, but those are my non-spoiler thoughts. All right, share your own thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.